Okay, so sorry about the shaky start there. um, my name is Carol. If you've never been here before, welcome back. Mostly the videos that I do of late have been diabetes videos. Occasionally I'll do some gardening videos. I had originally started out wanting to do a homesteading type channel, but then discovered that I do better with diabetes content. So anyway, this video has nothing to do with gardening or homesteading or diabetes. This is all about multi-level marketing, specifically my experience in a multi-level marketing firm. The company that I was with was called World Financial Group, WFG. So, brief history of what happened. I had moved to Chicago in 2006, and I was working for a company that was in the same industry that I work now, the same industry that I worked in out of college. It was compliance consulting type for employee benefit plans. And the firm that had initially hired me in the Chicago area, there were two girls that did most of the training, and they were always threatened by new employees, and they did everything in their power to get new employees fired within a couple months. Eventually, the owner figured out, hey, every time I have you two girls train somebody within a month or two, we fire them. This doesn't seem right. So she ended up letting them go. But I was one of the people that they had trained, and obviously that did not work out well. So I was applying for jobs right and left through places like Career Builder, Monster. At this point, Craigslist was still reputable. There were still like actual companies that would go on Craigslist and list jobs. So I had found this listing on Craigslist, and it was like a small firm that looked like it was kind of consulting for financials, the stuff. And I thought, well, this kind of seems a bit like sales, but they didn't have the typical commission thing of, undetermined or based on effort, et cetera, et cetera. It was, they had an actual amount down. I think it was 100,000 or something like that. And I don't normally like to go to sales type interviews because I never end up pursuing those. I'm not good at sales. I'm not good at that sort of thing. Financial advising is not something I've ever had an issue in. I do more of the background work. I do better with that. So anyway, I went ahead and sent my resume out because I do like to get some interview practice. And I thought, well, even if he calls me, and it's good practice for other interviews. And I heard back the next day, and he called me, from my resume, set up a time. He said, okay, this is when I have a management meeting. You can come in, meet all the managers. We'll get to know you. We'll do a presentation of the business. I thought, well, that does sound, getting a presentation of the business is something that these financial firms sometimes do, but, whatever, not a big deal. It is a little bit odd that they are doing this on a Tuesday night. Sorry about that. But I figured, well, okay, I don't have anything to do the next morning. Obviously, I'm not currently working, so I'll go in and do this interview. And I was meeting everybody, et cetera, et cetera. They did the business presentation. It wasn't really... It didn't really have the interview feel. It was more just, hey, this is so-and-so, this is so-and-so, everybody seemed really friendly. And then afterwards, not the guy that brought me in, but one of his downlines factors in a little bit more prominently later, came in to sign me up. The guy that actually had contacted me was the CEO. He was the CEO level, which I found out later they have multiple CEOs, but which is weird because most firms just have one. And she came in and she said, hey, everybody was really impressed with you. Would you like to come for a follow-up interview? And I was like, sure, why not? Still no red flags. So she set that up for me. The day of the interview, she sat in with me as well, and still, again, no red flags. I eventually ended up joining. I got my license pretty quickly, and I fell into it full force. For those who are going to accuse me of being lazy and not putting any effort into this, I was working this full time. I was also still applying for other jobs. I was working temp jobs, trying to make ends meet. Eventually ended up getting a full-time job nearby. And I would make recruiting calls on my lunch break. I was sending emails right and left, everything that they required of me. I was going to the big conventions. I think I only made like $70. And meanwhile, I was also being charged monthly airs and emission fees. I had to pay for the conventions, et cetera, et cetera. I was renting office space, sharing it with the gal that I had mentioned previously. She was doing most of my training, by the way. Eventually, I ended up getting another job that was in a suburb completely in a different part of, and it was north of Chicago, a different part of the greater Chicagoland area. And I had found an apartment on the north side of Chicago. This suburb was actually in the southwest suburbs, Oak Brook, DuPage County, for those of you familiar with the area. My other job was up in Lake County, so, kind of a bit of a haul to get there. So I had started to drift away. Now, I was still, because I was licensed, paying airs and emissions, but I had decided, since I'm not going anymore, I talked to the gal that I shared office space with, and I was like, hey, I think I'm going to stop paying off, rent. She was like, hey, that's no problem. I'll let people know. So I ended up going to one of the Saturday meetings, and I got approached by one of the other gals who had office space, and she started yelling at me because I wasn't paying rent anymore, and, oh, that means that other people have to pay more, and blah, blah, blah. And so I spoke to the gal that I shared office space with, and I was like, what's going on? And she said, well, there's no lease or anything that you signed, so don't worry about it. Just, you're not in the office much anymore, so just let it go. So I eventually just let my airs and emissions, or, let my licenses lapse. I was still paying airs and emissions, which I thought was odd, but let my licenses lapse. And then I finally called my credit card company, or rather, I had called the debt consolidation company because I'd racked up like $12,000 in credit card debt. And I said, hey, I need to get out of this debt. And they said, okay, no problem. We'll have to cancel all of your recurring charges. Just switch them over to your bank account, or, pay them via check. And I was like, sure, no problem. So the card that I had my airs and emissions coming on was canceled. I was no longer using it. And I got a nasty letter saying, oh, you're delinquent on your airs and emissions. Meanwhile, like I said, I was no longer licensed. I was no longer appointed with any company. But I was like, okay, well, I don't know why they're still charging me that. So eventually just kind of drifted away, didn't think about it. Fast forward to late 2011, 2012, thereabouts, I got a call from the gal that I shared office space with, and she was like, hey, we're part of a different team now. Would you like to meet with us, because you've not had your finances gone over in a while? I'll bring Jack, not his real name, with me. We can talk about, he was one of her downlines who I knew from previously. We'll come and talk to you about what we're doing now. It's completely different. I said, sure, no problem. So we met at McDonald's, and she said, okay, you've already seen the business presentation. We've changed it slightly, so you should really come out and see it again. I was like, okay, no problem. So I think you can see where this is going. I ended up joining again. I very quickly got my license. Everything was taking off much as it did before, except this time I didn't pay office rent. But I was encouraged even more to go to conventions, to, do everything in my power to make the business work while, again, still working full time. And at this point, I didn't have a car either, so I was having to find a way to take public transportation out, or, have other people pick me up at one of the local train stations, the Blue Line station, I think at Jefferson Park, and drive me out to Oak Brook, a different office again. And that lasted for, again, another year and a half. And finally, I was being driven back by my now upline. By the way, I had to pay like $200 to join again because they claimed that I owed back payments on my errors and omissions, which again, they were still charging me after I had let my license lapse. And she said, okay, well, I understand it's kind of inconvenient for you. Why don't you just refer business to me? I can help build your team for you, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't want to come out here anymore, I get it. So that's what we started doing. And then eventually I was just like, you know what? This isn't working anymore. I'm going to let my license lapse again. And again, they still continued charging me. And so I called my upline. I was like, hey, they're still charging me errors and omissions. Oh, that's because you're still technically appointed with these companies. You need to call and get yourself unappointed. So I called the companies, got myself unappointed. They were still charging errors and omissions. So finally, I called my credit card company and I was like, look, I don't think I should be charged this, explain the situation. And they were like, okay, we'll cancel that charge for you. We won't approve it for you. We will basically take this off and not allow them to charge you that. I was like, okay, no problem. Because I'd already done everything in my power to get them to stop, but they were still charging me. So in the meantime, I had moved back to central Indiana, bought a house, et cetera, and I should also mention that I had started going to counseling because I'd been in some abusive relationships and was trying to figure out, I think this might be a me problem. Why am I attracting the wrong people? Started going to counseling sessions with my therapist, started going to group counseling sessions that she would lead. And I discovered that part of my issue is that I am really bad, or had been really bad, at setting boundaries. So I was like, okay, I need to work on that. 2019, I get a message from my sideline, the guy who came with my then upline when I rejoined and had to pay a big fee to cancel the past errors and omissions that I should not have been charged, that I was charged, saying, hey, can you call me? And I was like, okay, no problem. I was thinking, they've not got over my finances again. I've since bought a house. They're big on, you need to do like annual checkups to get your finances looked at. I was thinking it's something like that, but I'm going to be very firm about not joining. So I thought I'll just hear him out, see what he has to say, and kind of make it abundantly clear I'm not going to join again. So I call him, and he proceeds to tell me that I owe WFG $200 in back errors and omissions payments because I hadn't been paying and I had canceled the payments, and they want that money now. And I said, Jack, again, not his real name, I let my license lapse and got unappointed from the companies that I was appointed with. I should not have been charged errors and omission for about a year that they were charging me. The way I see it, WFG actually owes me twice as much as you're claiming I owe them. So they're not going to see anything from me because they were charging me when I was not licensed and I was not appointed, and they should not have been charging me. And you're sitting here telling me that I should have allowed them to charge me further, and I owe them back payments. So unless they want to deduct the money that they say that they owe me and send me a check, they're not going to see anything from me. And he was like, oh, I'll look into that. Haven't heard from him since. So yeah, that was my last contact with anyone in WFG, was an angry phone call telling me that I owe this back money that I shouldn't have had to pay anyway. Because again, wasn't licensed, wasn't appointed with anyone, but they decided that I still owed them money. And it was just, it left a really bad taste in my mouth. And I was very angry for quite a while about that. So anyway, that's my experience with WFG. Just kind of, oh, by the way, before I go on, I would estimate, in addition to all the time that I spent that I wasn't paid for, aside from that $170 policy that ended up lapsing, by the way, because the guy like let it lapse a month after he got it. I probably spent, I estimate, in the neighborhood of $12,000 between rent and E&O payments and appointment charges and, joining WFG, rent, I think I mentioned that, conventions, etc., etc. Probably spent about $12,000. Compare that to my art business. I'll link my art sites below. As you know, I'm now painting, and I have a couple sites that my art is on. I have spent about a third of what I spent at WFG, and I've made 3 times as much. So, yeah. When they say, oh, you can do this part-time, spare time, and make a good income, you really can't. I was actually devoting quite a bit of time to it. I was devoting up to full-time hours to it, busting my butt. Lost about 12,000, went into debt twice because of them. And yeah, so I am a bit sour. I am a bit upset. But again, for people who say, oh, well, you just didn't work hard enough. No, I worked plenty hard. I can never get those hours back that I worked and put in. And I was not getting paid for it. And I actually lost money. So just be aware, if you ever get approached by anyone in World Financial Group, Aegon, Transamerica, whatever they're calling themselves now, or one of the other financial MLMs, you're not going to make any money, likely. Probably likely going to lose money, even though they claim you won't. So anyway, that's my MLM experience. Normally I don't do this type of video, but just thought I would put it out there. Okay. I'll be making more diabetes content later. Also have an update about my garden coming up, which I'm putting together. So yeah, if you're interested in that sort of thing, like and subscribe, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.